What's up, wizards? Welcome back to Across the Horizon, a collaborative effort between Renaissance Astrology and Hacking Fate. With me is Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and I'm Michael Beeson of Hacking Fate. And we are going into the 14th aphorism attributed to Ptolemy. We will discuss the three translations we now have of that. So I will go ahead and get us started with Ashmond, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
The astrologer will be entangled in a labyrinth of error when the seventh house and its lord shall be afflicted.
Okay, so Coley says for aphorism 14, the astrologer plunges himself into many errors when the cusp of the seventh house and the lord thereof are unfortunate or afflicted.
Which is exactly the same thing that John Partridge says.
See, this is a good example because they're all in agreement on that one, and so we don't have our weird translation glitches. Now, the only thing is I just don't happen to agree with that. If you have a consultation chart and you have an afflicted seventh house, then I'd be like, yeah, because what we're doing is in that case, we're focusing on the consultation, right? And so, but I have not found that in a situation where the seventh house is afflicted that I tend to make mistakes more, right? I mean, I don't think that the astrologer is really in the question particularly. I think that to me, when the horary, it's interesting because I have a lot of people, not a lot of people, but a certain number of people that are like, it's my question. Why aren't you using my location? And there's the whole. You should use the ask chart, the time, date, and place that the querent asked the question, or the receive chart when the astrologer receives and understands the question. And a lot of people are like, well, there's a logic to the ask question, right? And I'm like following Lily, who says, no, it's the time you receive and understand the question. And that to me makes sense insofar as it completes the circuit, right? And so until you actually ask the question of the astrologer, it's not really a real question, because you could be considering it for a long time and thinking about it, when is the actual time of the question? So in that case, that to me is what the astrologer, that's their place in the question. I mean, they're there to kind of complete the circuit, but I don't see them as a participant in it. I don't see that they, that the logic to me is not really there, is that why the astrologer comes into it in the seventh house. And it's sort of like there's this Lily says this, the end of the matter is the fourth house. So I mean, every single question is resolved by the fourth house, and I don't, that's something that I haven't found to be, it doesn't make sense to me. And also I haven't necessarily found it to be correct either in experience. So I would say that unless, like I said, you're talking about a consultation chart, I think that the astrologer isn't in the question enough to be affected by that. And if it was true, then I mean, every time you're not going to have a relationship, that also mean that you've screwed it up. I mean, it's just sort of like I just think that's problematic as a principle.
Well, that makes sense. And there is this weird like medieval horary school where they only use the angles for pretty much everything. So the end of the matter is always the fourth. The parties are always the first and seventh, and then the thing that's being asked about, as if it's a thing, is the 10th. And that's just a weird, confusing thing. I haven't used it. I've just kind of read about it a little bit. And that's where I think the book
Talks
of
about
Judges.
that? Oh, yeah. See, this is, yeah. See, this is what I would say about it is that, it's interesting when you look at Lily, who's, writing in 1647, and then one of the things I actually like about traditional astrology is there's all these sort of fossilized techniques or buried techniques they're there, but maybe nobody uses. I mean, Renaissance astrology is kind of this end of the process. So you start out with this Arabic astrology in the 9th and 10th century that's incredibly complex. You look at the kind of, translation of light and pushing virtue and all this sort of stuff, and the complications of it and the whole Orientality cycle. It's like, wow. And it loses a lot of detail by the time it gets to medieval with Bonatti, and then it's even more sort of simplified by Renaissance. But they remember this stuff. I mean, it's sort of buried, and you sort of trip over it from time to time. So Lily will mention stuff like that. And I think a lot of times it's sort of respect. They're like, you know what? This is what our predecessors say. And they'll say that, they do this, and Lily will often say, I do something different. So I have a feeling that fourth is the end of the matter stuff, and maybe even this astrologer with a seventh is a remnant of that older system, because it doesn't, the logic of everything's the fourth house doesn't apply, because man, if it's a camel, it's the 12th house. If it's illness, it's the sixth. So And that's, so I think that, maybe that's possible. The other thing is we just don't know. I mean, one of the things that I'm perfectly happy to do is to say, I don't know, and maybe that's my lawyer background, but I mean, I think the more academic would have a theory and we could start fighting about it and it would insist on, we could fight to the death on our hypothesis. But I'm like, you know what, we just don't know. So a lot of interesting stuff that's been presented here that's obviously food for thought and also for further research.
Oh, absolutely. Though I'm totally going to extend things a little bit further because I do have one story
Okay, give us a
of a
story.
seventh, and it's not mine. It's Hellenistic because it goes back to Tiberius and a story that's told about when Tiberius was selecting an astrologer. To call the potential astrologers to meet with him. He'd have a lovely meal with them, was on a cliff overlooking the ocean. And then after they read the chart, he would ask them if there was anything else that they saw in the chart. And if they said no, he would throw them over the cliff, or have them thrown over the cliff. And I'm trying to remember the name of the astrologer. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, he was like, "Oh no, I'm in danger." I could see that as being something that came out of the seventh, but I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have even really considered that because that struck me as kind of a natal thing, and it just wouldn't. Oh no, you're likely to kill anyone you interact with. Is that really what's going on with that?
The
It's not a
problem I
great
have with
thing.
that story is that it's like we don't have any charts,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of those things of like it's sort of like Lily predicting the Great Fire stuff. It's like when you or Zoller predicting 9/11. It's like when you push into it and you go underneath it, it's like it doesn't. You're not able to verify that as whether it's truly astrological or not, or just a cool story. I mean, that's one of the things about it. Oh, that sounds really cool, but it's like, well, it's funny because somebody emailed me the other day and they were like, they said, yeah, I had this astrologer. It wasn't an astrologer actually. It was just some, sage or whatever in India or Pakistan or something. And they just took my name, and with the letters of my name, they made amazing predictions. Can you do that? And I'm just like, why is it always somebody else with these amazing stories? It's like, and I'm sure that probably be after I'm gone, people be like, oh, Chris Warnock could do everything, and it's like, yeah, but he's not around anymore. So it's sort of like, I think that we just have to be careful about taking like I said, I like to see the chart. And if I can't see the chart, then I'm kind of like, okay, I'll have to put a question mark by that, particularly that stuff, the Tiberius. He actually was supposed to be quite an astrologer. I mean, he was actually quite good at it, but the real details we'll probably never know, what actually transpired. It's
Well,
like
yeah, I mean
Domitian. You know the story about Domitian, right?
no.
There's a whole astrological thing about Domitian, right? Who was an emperor, and he was freaking out about getting killed and hiding and stuff. And he ended up dying. He thought he escaped fate, and then he actually got killed that day anyway. He thought he somehow got out of it. There's a lot of that sort of stuff. It's like the meeting with death in the marketplace stories. Do you know those?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar
Yeah.
with those.
So
Yes.
that's what I mean. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, and then you just astrological is kind of an interesting twist on it.
Cool.
So we'll have to put a big question mark on that one. I don't doubt it,
And
but I don't necessarily buy it either.
it's definitely worth investigating, and it's
Indeed.
something that we can play with consultation charts. And maybe you guys have some stories and can let us know in the comments below. So we will see y'all next week when we jump into the 15th aphorism.